We'll turn this thing off. Here we go. Is it? You guys? That's okay. This is my second time doing that. I was really nervous on the first group, so I got that out of the way now, so I'll be a little better with y'all. We've been talking about leaving a mark, talking about a witness, and I'm going to tell you a story of complete strangers that left their mark on me. Before I do that, I'll just continue to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from a small town boy in central Illinois, a little farm town. Went off to college in central Illinois and got into the newspaper business. Worked my way up from the bottom. The ink got in my blood, and I happened to be pretty good at it. And had opportunities to go to other newspapers through headhunters. They heard about what I could do, and my first big job was in Terre Haute, Indiana. Worked for a different newspaper company, and I do things on the business side of the industry. I really felt like I was on top of the game. I just married. I had a beautiful wife. We had a beautiful little daughter, and we had just had a new son. And to me, nothing could be better in my life. I had everything going for me. The piece that was missing was God wasn't in our life. I grew up in a Christian home. Family had been there. I'd come up the ranks through church, but once you got to a certain age, I put that on the back burner. My career was first. Played a lot of softball. Worked on cars. Hanging out with friends. Those were the kind of things that were important to me at that time in my life. So while we were in Terre Haute, Indiana, another headhunter reached out and had the opportunity to go work for a newspaper in California. And here's where our story begins. So, super excited. Like I said, everything was going well for me. I bought a brand new 2010 Camaro, which my wife probably roll her eyes about that one. She wasn't real happy about that buy, but it kind of puts you where I was in my life a little bit. What was first? Went out for this interview, and I had a connecting flights. Flew out of Indianapolis to Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. There I had a layover for another flight to Sacramento, California. While I was waiting, I was getting ready to put on my headphones, and an older gentleman sitting next to me sparked a conversation. He asked what I was doing, where I was going, and I told him. He could tell I was super excited about this opportunity. And we talked about just about a little bit of everything. And he told me, Josh, God has a plan for you, and I'm going to pray for you. And I didn't take too much into that. I mean, that kind of thing. I've been on a lot of business trips, and those kind of things normally don't happen at an airport. But because he had told me he was a retired Baptist preacher, I expected him to say something like that. So I got onto my flight, and I'm heading to Sacramento from Dallas, and happened to be sitting next to a young gentleman. He's a little bit younger than me. And again, he sparked conversation. He asked where I was going, and again, I told him. He could tell, super excited about this journey I'm on. And through our conversation, he had mentioned, God has a plan for you, and I'm going to pray for you. And through our conversation, he told me he was a Mennonite preacher from Utah, and he was visiting family. And I'm super slow, so I haven't connected. There was so much conversation, I haven't connected the commonality between what was said at that moment. So that's day one of my trip. I get to where I'm going, which is Stockton, California, outside San Francisco. And that next day I had my interview with a newspaper publisher, Roger Coover. So we had a great interview, and I knew I nailed it. I knew they wanted me to come there, and things were continuing to look good. So that night, me and Mr. Coover went out for dinner and had some personal conversation. And he had told me he makes a lot of decisions in the business world with his faith. And that kind of thing isn't said in the business world, And he had told me his wife was Korean, and he was very involved in the Korean Methodist church there in Stockton. And he knew that what's meant to be will happen, he told me, and God has a plan for me, and he's going to pray on this, and he hopes that it works out where I come work for him. Still, nothing's been put together in my head because God's not on the forefront, Spent the night. The next day I got up, went back to Sacramento to catch my flight back to Dallas. So I'm on this flight, and I'm sitting next to a little bit older couple from Sacramento on their way to visit family, and they sparked conversation. in this conversation, they asked what I was doing. Again, I said, I had this great interview. I nailed it. I was super excited. They could tell. They were happy for me. And the lady, which I don't know her name, looked at me and said, God has a plan for you. And we're going to pray for you. Still, I'm super slow, okay? I'm not connecting the dots yet. I get to Dallas, and I hop on the next flight back to Indianapolis. And I'm sitting up in the front of the airplane, and the seat next to me is empty. So I was kind of relaxed, had my bag there, getting ready to put my headphones on to relax for the flight. Stewardess comes up to me, says, "Sir, would you mind if a lady sits next to you? She'd sprained her ankle and can't walk all the way back to her seat." I didn't mind it. I moved my bag. It was fine. She sat next to me and began to spark conversation. And she asked me of my trip and what I was doing, and I told her, she could tell I was excited, and she looked over at me and said, God has a plan for you, and I'm going to pray for you. And I sat there, and then it was like it nailed me. God has a plan for me. And I looked over at this lady, and I said, "Ma'am, I am not a kook, okay? I'm going to tell you in these last few days what's happened to me on this trip." And I told her the story that I just told you. And she reached over. She grabbed my hands, and she began to pray with me right there on this airplane. And I'll tell you, that stuff just doesn't happen. And I had these people on the airplane sitting next to me kind of looking like these. They knew we just met, and we weren't being quiet. We were praying. So something came into my heart at that moment, and for me, there was no more faking it. There was no more going through the motions, celebrating Christmas. Yeah, and I colored Easter eggs. I was a Christian. There was more to it at that point. When I got back to Indianapolis, the minute my phone worked, I called my wife. And I told her that story. And she's like, "Yeah, that's amazing, Josh. What about the interview? How'd everything go?" And I was so focused on that story, I called my best friend, and I called my mom, and I told them the story, this amazing thing that just happened to me that just doesn't happen. And from that moment, I've been changed. When we got to California, I joined a church, a good Bible-based church, and got my daughter in a private Christian school. We made new friends and really got God back in my heart. And I've been changed ever since. And through my career now, it's led me to Florida. And now I'm in front of you all telling you the story. I'm not sure what God's plan has for me, but it's been an amazing journey. And I'm looking forward to joining the church and getting to know all of you and making connections. So, thank you. Bye.